The scanner beeped green, but Carol's hand didn't move toward the keyboard. She held Marcus's boarding pass between two fingers, studying it like it might be counterfeit. Her eyes flicked from the paper to his face, then to André standing just behind him, then back to the pass. "Can I see your IDs, please?" Marcus felt the familiar tightness begin in his chest. 3 passengers had walked through ahead of them without a single question. The scanner had already confirmed their seats. But here they were, standing at the podium while the line built up behind them. "Is there an issue with the reservation?" he asked, keeping his voice level. Carol didn't answer. She was already typing something into her computer, her frown deepening with each keystroke. That moment, right there at gate 42, was when Marcus realized that everything he'd done that morning, every careful choice, every deliberate preparation, might not matter at all. But 12 hours earlier, none of that had entered his mind. Marcus woke at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm. The apartment was dark except for the blue glow of his laptop screen on the dining table where he'd left it the night before. He lay still for a moment, mentally reviewing the presentation deck he'd spent the past week refining. Client meeting in Atlanta. Strategic expansion analysis. 12 slides, tight narrative, defensible projections. He swung his legs out of bed and padded to the bathroom, careful not to wake André on the couch. His younger brother had crashed at his place after a late night studying for finals. Howard University's spring break started today, which meant André was finally free to visit their grandmother in Atlanta. Marcus had offered to bring him along on the work trip. 2 birds, 1 flight. The shower was hot and efficient. Marcus shampooed twice, a habit from their mother that she drilled into both boys. "You want them to see you or smell you first," she'd say. He smiled at the memory, even as the familiar weight of her advice settled on him. She'd meant well. She always meant well. But the subtext was exhausting. You have to be better prepared, more polished, more careful than everyone else. After drying off, Marcus stood in front of his closet. The Brooks Brothers shirt, pale blue, no wrinkles. Dark chinos, recently pressed. Brown leather belt. Chelsea boots that were broken in enough to be comfortable but still looked sharp. He dressed methodically, checking his reflection in the full-length mirror his ex-girlfriend had insisted he buy. "You need to see yourself the way other people see you," she'd said. At the time, he thought she meant it romantically. Later, he realized she meant it strategically. He looked professional. Confident. The kind of black man they wouldn't feel threatened by. That thought flickered through his mind and he pushed it away, annoyed at himself for even thinking it. He wasn't dressing for white people. He was dressing for himself. For the client. For the work. Right? Marcus moved to the dining table and opened his laptop. The presentation deck filled the screen. He clicked through it one more time, checking transitions, reviewing speaker notes, making sure every chart was labeled correctly. This was his 3rd major client pitch since joining the consulting firm 8 months ago. The first 2 had gone well. Well enough that his manager had started CCing him on emails to senior partners. Well enough that he'd been invited to the quarterly leadership offsite. Well enough that his father had sent him a 2-word text after the last one, proud. Keep going. Marcus stared at that message now, still saved in his thread with a dad, sell. 2 words. No elaboration. No advice. No offer to open doors or make introductions. Just acknowledgement. That was the deal they'd made, unspoken but understood. Marcus would build his own path. His father would stay out of it. No leveraging the Richardson name. No calls to old colleagues. No shortcuts. Because if Marcus succeeded with his father's help, he'd never know if he could have done it alone. He closed the laptop and slid it into his leather messenger bag. André stirred on the couch, one arm hanging off the edge, his Howard hoodie bunched up around his shoulders. Marcus walked over and nudged his foot. Yo. Flight's at 9. We need to leave in 45. André groaned and pulled a throw pillow over his face. Too early for human activity. Should have thought about that before you stayed up until 2 watching conspiracy videos. They weren't conspiracy videos. They were documentaries about systemic inequity in urban planning. Right. Very important research. André sat up, rubbing his eyes. His locks were pulled back in a ponytail, and he had pillow creases on his cheek. He looked younger than 22, which Marcus knew frustrated him. People always assumed André was the baby, the one who needed looking after, even when he was the one with a 3.8 GPA and a research assistantship. You stress-reviewed your deck again, didn't you? André said, nodding toward the messenger bag. Just being thorough. You're always thorough. You know it's good. Marcus shrugged. Good isn't the same as bulletproof. André stood and stretched, his Howard hoodie riding up to show a sliver of his stomach. He walked to the bathroom, then called back, "You think Dad ever stress-reviewed his pitches?" The question hung in the air. Marcus didn't answer right away. He moved to the kitchen and started the coffee maker, the machine hissing to life. Probably, Marcus said finally. Before he had the name. Before people knew who he was. And now. Now he doesn't need to pitch. People come to him. André appeared in the bathroom doorway, toothbrush in his mouth. Must be nice. Marcus poured 2 mugs of coffee. That's the goal, right? Build something so solid you don't have to prove yourself every time you walk in a room. Yeah, but you're already solid. You've got the degree, the job, the track record. At what point do you stop auditioning? Marcus handed him a mug. When they stop making you. André took a sip and winced. Too philosophical for 6 a.m. They drank their coffee in comfortable silence. The apartment was small but clean, decorated in the way single men in their 20s decorated, minimalist by necessity, not design. A couch. A TV mounted on the wall. A dining table that doubled as a desk. Framed degree from Northwestern on one wall, a single piece of abstract art his mother had given him on another. It was enough. It was his. André disappeared into the bathroom to shower, and Marcus checked his phone. Email from the client confirming the meeting time. Text from his manager wishing him luck. Notification from his rideshare app that the driver was 12 minutes away. He opened the thread with his father, scrolled up past the proud. Keep going message. The texts before that were sparse. Brief check-ins. Logistical questions about Thanksgiving plans. A forwarded article about consulting industry trends. Nothing heavy. Nothing demanding. His father was giving him space. Marcus appreciated that. He also resented it, in a way he didn't fully understand. Like the space was a test he had to pass before earning something more substantial. He closed the thread and pocketed the phone. André emerged from the bathroom 15 minutes later, dressed in joggers and a fresh Howard hoodie. He'd rebraided 2 of his locks that had come loose. Marcus noticed he'd also put on cologne, something citrusy and a little too strong. Trying to impress Grandma? Marcus asked. She likes when we make an effort. She's going to feed us until we can't move and then ask why we look skinny. André grinned. Facts. The rideshare pulled up outside at 7:16. They grabbed their bags, Marcus's a compact carry-on and messenger bag, André's a battered duffel that had seen him through 4 years of college. They locked up and headed downstairs. The driver was a middle-aged white man with a friendly face and a car that smelled like vanilla air freshener. He helped them load the bags into the trunk, then confirmed the destination. Airport, Terminal 2? Yeah, Marcus said, sliding into the back seat. André took the other side. The drive was smooth. Early morning traffic meant they hit mostly green lights. The driver tried to make small conversation, asking if they were traveling for business or pleasure. Marcus said business. André said visiting family. The driver nodded and let the conversation drop, turning up the radio to fill the silence. Marcus stared out the window as the city slid past. Familiar streets. Coffee shops just opening. A runner in neon sneakers waiting at a crosswalk. Everything moving as if nothing had happened. André nudged him. You good?
Yeah.
Just thinking about the pitch. You're going to crush it. Probably. Definitely. André leaned back and closed his eyes. Wake me when we get there. Marcus didn't close his eyes. He watched the city blur into highway, the highway blur into exit ramps, the exit ramps blur into the wide loop of airport access roads. The driver pulled up to departures at 7:58, 2 minutes ahead of schedule. They unloaded the bags. Marcus tipped through the app. The driver thanked them and pulled away. The terminal was already busy. Business travelers in suits, families wrangling strollers, college kids in sweatpants clutching oversized coffee cups. Marcus and André joined the flow toward the automatic doors. TSA pre-check? André asked.
Yeah.
You should get it. Costs money. Saves time. Time's free. Marcus didn't argue. They stepped through the sliding doors into the cool, fluorescent-lit interior of the terminal. The departures board hung overhead, rows of flight numbers and gate assignments scrolling in yellow text. Marcus found theirs, Empire Air 1847 to Atlanta, Gate 42, on time. They moved toward security. The line was moderate, maybe 20 people deep. Marcus pulled out his phone and boarding pass, checking the gate number again even though he'd just seen it. Gate 42. Boarding at 8:45. Plenty of time. André yawned and adjusted the strap of his duffel. Think they'll have good snacks on this flight? It's an hour and a half. You'll survive. I'm just saying, complimentary snacks are a sign of a quality airline. They shuffled forward in line. Ahead of them, a white family with 2 small kids was being waved through the metal detector. The TSA agent, a bald man in his 30s with a name tag that read Brad, smiled at the mother and made a joke about how hard it must be traveling with toddlers. She laughed. He waved them on. Marcus and André reached the podium. Marcus handed over his ID and boarding pass. The agent, a different one, scanned them quickly and handed them back. Have a good flight. They moved to the conveyor belt. Marcus pulled out his laptop, slipped off his Chelsea boots, placed everything in gray bins. André did the same, moving slower, less practiced. The line moved. Marcus walked through the metal detector. No beep. He collected his things on the other side, reassembling his bag with practiced efficiency. André came through behind him. The metal detector stayed silent. But as he reached for his duffel on the conveyor belt, Brad stepped over. Mind if I take a look in your bag? André paused. Sure. Why? Random screening. Just routine. Brad unzipped the duffel and started pulling things out. Clothes. A toiletry bag. Textbooks. A laptop charger. He examined each item with exaggerated care, holding up a bottle of cologne and shaking it slightly before setting it down. Marcus stood a few feet away, watching. His jaw tightened. The family with the toddlers was already at the far end of the security area, pulling their shoes back on. They hadn't been stopped. Hadn't been screened. Hadn't been touched. Brad finished with André's bag, zipping it back up. You're all set. Thanks for your patience. André slung the duffel over his shoulder, his expression carefully neutral. He walked over to Marcus without saying anything. They moved toward the exit of the security area, away from the crowd. Random, huh? André muttered. Marcus didn't respond right away. He was watching the flow of passengers behind them. An elderly white couple waved through. A young white woman in yoga pants waved through. A South Asian man in business attire pulled aside for additional screening. How many times we gotta be random? André said, louder now. Marcus turned to him. You can be right, or you can make your flight. Pick one. André's eyes flashed. What if being right should be enough? Marcus felt the weight of that question. He wanted to agree. He wanted to say yes, it should be enough. But he knew better. He'd learned that lesson years ago, watching his father navigate rooms where being right meant nothing without being strategic. Come on, Marcus said quietly. Let's just get to the gate. They walked in silence through the terminal. Past Hudson News selling overpriced magazines. Past a coffee shop with a line 8 people deep. Past a family sitting on the floor because all the chairs were taken. Gate 42 was in Concourse B, a 10-minute walk from security. They passed other gates, other flights, other travelers who looked tired or excited or bored. No one looked at them twice. No one seemed to notice them at all. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. Marcus checked his phone. 8:24, they had 20 minutes before boarding. He found 2 seats near the gate and sat down, setting his messenger bag on the floor between his feet. André sat next to him, pulling out his phone and scrolling through something Marcus couldn't see. The gate area was filling up. Business people typing on laptops. A family with 3 kids playing some kind of card game on the floor. An elderly white couple sitting near the front, the woman knitting, the man reading a newspaper. At the podium, a gate agent was setting up. She was white, probably early 50s, with short brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her name tag read Carol. She greeted an older white couple warmly as they approached to ask a question, smiling and pointing them toward the correct gate. Marcus watched her for a moment, then looked away. She seemed professional. Efficient. Normal. He opened his laptop and pulled up the presentation deck one more time. Not because he needed to review it. Because sitting still made him restless. André glanced over. Dude. You know that thing backwards and forwards. Just making sure. Making sure of what? That the font didn't change overnight? Marcus closed the laptop. Fine. You're right. They sat in silence. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from his manager, knock am dead. He typed back, will do. Another buzz. This time from his father, safe travels. Marcus stared at the message. 2 words again. Simple. Direct. No pressure. No expectations. He typed back, thanks. The gate area continued to fill. More passengers arriving, checking the departure board, claiming seats. A woman in a business suit sat across from them, pulling out a tablet. A college kid with headphones slouched into a chair near the window. At 8:40, the PA system crackled to life. Good morning, passengers. This is the boarding announcement for Empire Air Flight 1847 with service to Atlanta. We will begin boarding in approximately 5 minutes, starting with our first-class passengers and anyone needing additional assistance. Please have your boarding passes ready. Marcus and André stood. They'd been upgraded to first class using miles Marcus had accumulated from work travel. It was a small luxury, but one Marcus had insisted on. If they were flying together, they were flying comfortable. They moved toward the podium, joining a small cluster of other first-class passengers. The elderly white couple from earlier. A businessman in a charcoal suit. A younger woman with a designer handbag. Carol was behind the podium now, typing something into the computer. She looked up briefly as passengers gathered, then returned to her screen. At 8:45, she picked up the microphone. We will now begin boarding first-class passengers and those needing additional assistance for Flight 1847 to Atlanta. The elderly couple stepped forward first. Carol scanned their passes, smiled, and waved them through. Enjoy your flight. The businessman went next. Same process. Scan, smile, wave. The woman with the designer handbag. Scan, smile, wave. Marcus and André stepped up to the podium. Marcus handed over both boarding passes with a polite smile. Morning. Carol took them. Her fingers hovered over the scanner. She looked at the passes. Looked at Marcus. Looked at André. Then she scanned Marcus's pass. The scanner beeped green. But Carol didn't look at the screen. She scanned it again. The beep came again. Green. She frowned. Can I see your IDs, please? Marcus felt the shift. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. But there. He kept his voice level. Is there an issue with the reservation? Carol didn't answer. She was already typing something into the computer, her frown deepening. Behind them, the line was starting to build. Marcus could feel eyes on his back. Carol looked up from the screen. Her expression was neutral, professional. But something in her tone had changed. These tickets were purchased together? Yes, Marcus said. What's the purpose of your travel? The question landed wrong. Marcus felt André shift beside him. Business meeting in Atlanta, Marcus said carefully. Carol's eyes flicked to André. Both of you? I'm visiting family, André said, his voice tight. Carol typed something else. The seconds stretched. Behind them, someone sighed audibly. Can I ask where you purchased these tickets? Carol said. Marcus felt heat rising up the back of his neck. Through the airline website. Is there a problem? Just verifying. Carol's hand moved toward the desk phone. These are premium seats. The implication hung in the air. Marcus's hands were shaking slightly. He clasped them behind his back, forcing his voice to stay calm. The reservation is under my name. Marcus Richardson. The tickets were purchased 4 days ago using accumulated miles and a credit card. Everything should be in your system. Carol picked up the phone. Let me just confirm with reservations. She turned slightly away, lowering her voice. Marcus caught fragments, premium cabin, last-minute booking, need to verify payment method. André leaned closer to Marcus. What is happening right now? Marcus didn't answer. He was watching Carol's face, watching the way she held the phone, watching the deliberate slowness of her movements. Across the terminal, Brad from TSA noticed the delay. He started walking over, his expression neutral but alert. The line behind them was 8 people deep now. A businessman checked his watch loudly. A woman whispered something to her husband. Marcus felt the weight of their stares. The silent judgment. The assumption that he and André were the problem. Carol hung up the phone. The tickets are valid. There was a long pause. She still didn't scan them through. I need to ask you a few more questions, she said. Marcus felt something crack inside him. A thin, fragile thing that had been holding his composure together. What exactly is the issue, he said, his voice still controlled but harder now. Brad arrived at the podium, his hand resting casually on his belt. Everything all right, Carol? Just verifying a booking, she said. Brad's eyes scanned Marcus and André. Professional threat assessment. Sizing them up. Marcus met his gaze. Held it. The gate area had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Carol looked at Marcus. I have a few standard security questions. After confirming our tickets are valid? Marcus said. Brad stepped closer. Sir, keep your voice down. Marcus wasn't yelling. He knew he wasn't yelling. But the accusation was there, unspoken. The assumption that he was being aggressive. Threatening. Out of line. He took a breath. Forced his shoulders to relax. What specific policy requires additional screening after verification, he asked. Carol's expression didn't change. I have discretion to ensure passenger safety and prevent fraud. The words were perfect. Corporate. Defensible. And completely subjective. Marcus felt the trap closing. Every word he said could be used against him. Every question could be labeled as aggression. Every attempt to defend himself could be twisted into proof that he was the problem. Carol's desk phone rang. She answered, her face going pale as she listened. She set the phone down carefully, her hands trembling. Tom's radio crackled. He stepped away to answer, his shoulders tightening as he listened. Brad looked between them. What's going on? Carol's voice was barely audible. Regional VP. On the line. Now. The power had shifted. Invisible but unmistakable. Marcus felt it in the air, in the sudden tension radiating from Tom and Carol, in the way Brad's confident posture faltered. He'd made the call. His father was moving. And everything was about to change. The silence after his father's call felt heavier than the confrontation itself. Marcus slipped his phone into his pocket and looked at André. His brother's jaw was still tight, his eyes fixed on Tom and Carol at the podium. Come on, Marcus said quietly. Let's sit. They moved back to their seats near the window. The gate area had resumed its normal rhythm. Passengers settling in with laptops and newspapers. A toddler wandering between rows of chairs while her mother scrolled through her phone. Business travelers checking emails, faces illuminated by blue screen light. Marcus sat down and forced himself to breathe. His chest still felt tight, his hands still unsteady. He'd made the call. The thing he swore he wouldn't do. The thing that meant admitting he couldn't navigate this alone. André slumped into the seat beside him, pulling out his phone but not really looking at it. You think it'll actually work?
Yeah,
Marcus said. It'll work. How do you know? Because Dad doesn't make calls he can't finish. André was quiet for a moment. Then, you okay? Marcus didn't answer right away. He watched Carol at the podium, still on the phone, her face pale and drawn. Tom had stepped away, radio pressed to his ear, his back to the gate area. Brad hovered nearby, uncertain now, the confidence from earlier completely gone. I don't know yet, Marcus said finally. They sat in silence. Minutes passed. The departure board still showed their flight as on time, but Marcus knew that wouldn't last. Whatever his father was doing, it was bigger than just getting them on the plane. At 8:52, the PA system crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief operational delay for Flight 1847 to Atlanta. We'll update you shortly. Thank you for your patience. Passengers groaned. Someone muttered about connections. The businessman who'd been behind them in line stood up and approached the podium, demanding answers. Carol stammered something about operational review. He walked away shaking his head. André leaned closer to Marcus. Operational delay. That's us, right?
Yeah,
That's us. So what now? We wait. More minutes passed. Marcus watched the terminal move around them. A family with matching suitcases hurried past, checking gate numbers. A janitor pushed a cart down the concourse, emptying trash bins. A woman in a pilot's uniform walked briskly toward a different gate, rolling luggage clicking behind her. Everything moving as if nothing had happened except for the tension radiating from gate 42. At 9:03, a flight attendant appeared at the jetway entrance. She spoke briefly with Carol, glancing at her watch, then disappeared back onto the aircraft. Tom returned from his radio call. His face was ashen. He walked directly to Carol and spoke in a low voice Marcus couldn't hear. Carol's shoulders sagged. She nodded once, then picked up the desk phone again. Marcus felt André shift beside him. Something's happening.
Yeah,
Carol hung up the phone and approached them. Her professional mask was cracking now, her movements stiff and uncertain. Mr. Richardson, she said, her voice carefully controlled. We apologize for the delay. We're ready to board you now. Marcus stood slowly. André followed. What changed? Marcus asked. Carol's eyes flicked away. We've completed our verification process. You completed that 20 minutes ago. Marcus kept his voice level, but there was steel underneath. What changed? Carol couldn't meet his eyes. We're boarding you now, sir. André stepped forward. That's it? We just walk on like nothing happened? Marcus reached for the boarding passes still sitting on the podium. He picked them up himself, not waiting for Carol to hand them over. No, he said quietly. This isn't over. He scanned both passes at the reader. The machine beeped twice. Green lights. Accepted. They walked down the jetway in silence. The flight attendant at the aircraft door greeted them with professional warmth, completely unaware of what had just happened. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome aboard. Marcus nodded and moved into the cabin. First class was already half full. The elderly couple from earlier sat in the front row, the woman still knitting. A businessman in a charcoal suit typed on his laptop. The young woman with the designer handbag had her eyes closed, earbuds in. Marcus and André found their seats. 2A and 2B. Window and aisle. Marcus sat down and buckled his seatbelt with mechanical precision. His hands had stopped shaking, but the tightness in his chest remained. André settled into the aisle seat, setting his duffel in the overhead bin. He sat down heavily. So we won, he asked quietly. Marcus looked out the window at the terminal. He could see the gate area from here. Tom and Carol standing at the podium. Brad walking away toward another gate. Everything returning to normal. Dad made the first call, Marcus said. He's about to make the second. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Folks, we're experiencing a brief operational delay. We'll have an update for you shortly. Appreciate your patience. Passengers around them sighed. Someone asked a flight attendant what was happening. She smiled apologetically and said she'd find out. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. A different flight attendant approached Marcus's row. Young, professional, uncertain. Mr. Richardson, she said quietly. Marcus looked up. The captain would like a word with you. If you could come forward, please. Marcus unbuckled and followed her to the cockpit. The captain stood in the doorway, his expression grim but respectful. Sir, he said, keeping his voice low. I've been informed of the gate incident. We're holding departure pending an internal review. We're on board, Marcus said. The issue's resolved. The captain shook his head slightly. With respect, sir. No, it isn't. We've been ordered to hold pending personnel interviews. Gate operations is being reviewed. He paused, meeting Marcus's eyes. I'm sorry this happened on my aircraft. Marcus returned to his seat. André looked at him, the question clear on his face. Plane's not moving until this is handled properly, Marcus said. André leaned back, a small smile forming. Dad doesn't play. Through the window, Marcus saw Carol being escorted away from the podium. Her badge was no longer clipped to her shirt. Tom stood alone now, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand rubbing his face. The PA crackled again. Ladies and gentlemen, operational review in progress. We appreciate your continued patience. The businessman in first class groaned loudly. Marcus watched the terminal. Watched the machinery of accountability begin to turn. His father hadn't just gotten them on the plane. He'd stopped the plane from leaving until justice was served. Marcus watched through the aircraft window as Carol disappeared into the terminal's back corridors, escorted by someone in a dark suit he didn't recognize. Tom remained at the podium, alone now, his phone still pressed to his ear. The gate area had grown quieter. Passengers who'd been waiting to board had scattered to nearby seats, resigned to the delay. André shifted beside him. How long you think this takes? However long it takes, Marcus said. A flight attendant moved through the cabin, offering water and apologizing for the delay. Most passengers accepted with forced patience. The businessman in the charcoal suit declined curtly, his irritation visible. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his father, stay put. Don't engage unless asked directly. He showed it to André, who read it and nodded. 20 minutes passed. The cabin grew warmer. Someone requested the air be turned up. A child in economy started crying, the sound carrying forward through the open cockpit door. Then, at 9:34, movement. Tom was joined at the podium by a woman Marcus hadn't seen before. Mid-40s, dark blazer, name tag too small to read from this distance. She spoke briefly with Tom, glanced at a tablet he handed her, then nodded. The PA system crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be resuming boarding for Flight 1847 to Atlanta momentarily. We apologize for the inconvenience. Passengers around Marcus began gathering their belongings. Relief mixed with residual frustration. The businessman closed his laptop with an audible snap. But the plane didn't move. The new gate agent picked up the microphone. We will now resume boarding, beginning with first class and passengers needing additional assistance. The jetway door opened. Passengers who'd been turned away earlier began filing back down to the gate. Marcus watched them go, a slow procession of rolling bags and impatient expressions. André looked at Marcus. We staying? Dad said stay put. But they're boarding. We're already on. André settled back into his seat, uncertain. Through the window, Marcus saw the flow restart. The elderly couple who'd boarded smoothly before approached the new agent. She scanned their passes, smiled, waved them through. They disappeared into the jetway. The businessman. Scan, smile, wave. The young woman with the designer bag. Scan, smile, wave. Then a pause. The line slowed. Marcus couldn't see clearly from his seat, but something had changed. The new agent was speaking to someone. A passenger had stopped at the podium instead of walking through. André leaned across Marcus to look out the window. That's the gate right there. Can you see what's happening? Marcus pressed closer to the glass. The angle was wrong. He could see the agent's profile, see her holding a boarding pass, see her mouth moving. But he couldn't see who she was talking to. Then Brad appeared. Walking over from wherever he'd gone after the first confrontation. His posture was different now. Less casual. More official. Marcus felt something tighten in his stomach. Something's wrong, André said. A moment later, a flight attendant appeared beside their row. Different from before. Older, with silver hair and kind eyes. Mr. Richardson? I'm sorry, but we need to ask you and your brother to deplane temporarily. Marcus looked up at her. Why? There's been a request for witness statements regarding the earlier incident. Gate operations needs to speak with you. We gave our account already, Marcus said. I understand. But they've asked that you come back to the terminal. It shouldn't take long. Marcus glanced at André, then back at the flight attendant. Her expression was apologetic but firm. This wasn't a request. They unbuckled and stood. Retrieved André's duffel from the overhead. Walked back down the aisle past passengers who just settled in, who now watched them leave with curious, assessing eyes. The jetway felt longer walking out than it had walking in. They emerged into the gate area. The new agent was still at the podium, but now Tom stood beside her, along with another man Marcus didn't recognize. Older, silver hair, expensive suit. He held a leather portfolio under one arm. Tom gestured toward a door marked "Airport Personnel Only." Mr. Richardson, if you and your brother would follow me, please. They walked through the door into a narrow hallway. Fluorescent lights. Beige walls. The institutional anonymity of back-of-house airport operations. Tom led them to a conference room. Glass walls overlooking the terminal. A long table. Several chairs. A screen mounted on the far wall, currently dark. Already seated, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a tablet, a younger man in business casual with a recorder on the table in front of him, and the silver-haired man from the gate, now seated at the head of the table. Tom gestured to chairs along the side. Please, sit. Marcus and André sat. The door closed behind them. The silver-haired man spoke first. His voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. Mr. Richardson, I'm Kenneth Strauss, Regional Vice President for Empire Air. This is Jessica Yoon, our HR Director, and Miles Curry, Corporate Counsel. We're here to review the incident that occurred at Gate 42 this morning. Marcus said nothing. His father's text was still fresh in his mind. Don't engage unless asked directly. Kenneth continued. We understand there was a delay in your boarding process. We take all passenger concerns seriously, and we want to ensure we have a full understanding of what occurred. He paused, as if expecting Marcus to fill the silence. Marcus waited. Kenneth glanced at Jessica, who tapped her tablet and brought up something on the screen. Security footage. Gate 42. The angle from above the podium. We've reviewed the video, Kenneth said. We'd like to walk through the sequence with you. Just to confirm the facts. Miles, the legal counsel, leaned forward slightly. This conversation is being recorded for documentation purposes. You're not under any obligation to participate, but we'd appreciate your cooperation. Marcus looked at him. At the recorder on the table. At Jessica's tablet. At Kenneth's carefully neutral expression. This wasn't a witness interview. This was damage control. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened. A woman in an airport operations uniform stepped in, holding a phone. She walked directly to Kenneth and whispered something in his ear. Kenneth's expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just a slight tightening around his eyes. A barely perceptible straightening of his posture. He took the phone from her and stepped away from the table, pressing it to his ear. The room went quiet. Kenneth listened. Said nothing. Just listened. Then, very quietly, I understand. Yes. Right away. He handed the phone back to the woman, who left quickly. Kenneth returned to his seat. His demeanor had changed. The gentle authority was gone, replaced by something sharper. More careful. Gentlemen, he said, looking directly at Marcus. We have a remote participant joining this review. He nodded to Jessica, who tapped her tablet. The screen on the wall activated. Connection sound. Camera adjusting. And then the screen filled with a face Marcus knew better than almost anyone. Dr. Williams Richardson. His father. Seated in his office, mahogany shelves visible behind him, wearing a perfectly tailored blue suit. His expression was calm. Composed. Utterly controlled. Kenneth's posture had gone rigid. Jessica's pen clicked nervously. Miles glanced at Kenneth, then back at the screen. Marcus heard André exhale slowly beside him. Their father looked directly into the camera. When he spoke, his voice carried the same measured authority it always did. But underneath, Marcus heard something else. Something cold and precise. Good afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Williams Richardson, CEO of Richardson Consulting Group. Empire Air is one of our corporate clients. He let that settle. More importantly, Marcus and André are my sons. Silence. Kenneth's face had gone pale. Marcus watched his father on the screen, watched the way he commanded the room from 200 miles away, watched the power shift happen in real time. His father opened a folder on his desk. The sound was crisp through the speakers. Now. Before we discuss perceptions, optics, or intent, let's discuss procedure. Marcus's father looked directly into the camera, his gaze steady and precise. The conference room had gone completely still. Kenneth sat frozen at the head of the table. Jessica's pen had stopped clicking. Miles leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. I have your Gate Operations Manual, version 12.4, effective January 2026, his father said, tapping the folder on his desk. I've also pulled the surveillance footage, radio logs, and reservation system records. Miles glanced at Kenneth. The look said everything. He already has everything. His father continued, his tone unchanged. Shall we walk through what happened? Step by step. Kenneth cleared his throat. Dr. Richardson, we're conducting a thorough internal review. Then let's be thorough. His father's interruption was smooth, almost gentle. Ms. Tran was the gate agent on duty. I'd like to hear her account of the decision-making process. Kenneth shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Tran has been temporarily reassigned pending review. She's not present. Then bring her in. It wasn't a request. Kenneth looked at Jessica, who nodded and picked up a phone on the table. She spoke quietly into it, then set it down. She'll be here in a few minutes, Jessica said. Marcus's father nodded. While we wait, let's review the footage. Jessica tapped her tablet. The screen split. One side showed Marcus's father. The other showed security camera footage from Gate 42. The timestamp read 8 hours 45 minutes and 3 seconds. Marcus watched himself and André approach the podium. Watched Carol take their boarding passes. Watched her pause. His father's voice came through the speakers. Standard procedure when passengers present boarding passes is to scan immediately. Correct? Kenneth answered carefully. Yes. Unless there's a visible issue with the document. Was there a visible issue? Silence. The passes were scanned after the delay, Kenneth said. They came back valid. I'm asking about before the scan. What visible issue justified the deviation from procedure? No one answered. The footage continued. Carol requesting IDs. Carol typing into her computer. The line forming behind them. Brad walking over. Marcus felt André shift beside him, watching his own image on screen. The door opened. Carol entered, escorted by the woman in the operations uniform. Carol's face was drawn, her movements stiff. She sat in the chair at the far end of the table, as far from Marcus and André as possible. Marcus's father didn't acknowledge her entrance. He kept his eyes on the screen. Ms. Tran, he said finally. Walk me through your thought process. Carol's voice was small. I had concerns about the authenticity of the tickets. Based on what specific indicators? Carol hesitated. The booking was recent. Premium seating. I wanted to verify. How recent? 4 days prior. Marcus's father paused. Your policy allows same-day upgrades, correct? Miles spoke for the first time. Yes. Our system permits upgrades and premium bookings up to departure. So 4 days is well within normal parameters. Yes, Miles said. Marcus's father turned his attention back to Carol. What else prompted your concern? The passengers seemed. I had a feeling something wasn't right. A feeling. Carol's hands trembled slightly on the table. Yes. Did you scan the boarding passes before requesting additional verification? No. Why not? I wanted to confirm identity first. Marcus's father leaned forward slightly. The movement was minimal, but the effect was immediate. Everyone in the room tensed. That's not procedure, he said quietly. Procedure is scan first. If the system flags an issue, then request ID. You reversed the order. Why? Carol opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked at Kenneth. Kenneth remained silent. Ms. Tran, his father continued. You called reservations. What did they tell you? That the tickets were valid. And then you boarded them? No. Why not? I still had security concerns. About what, specifically? Carol's voice cracked slightly. They seemed agitated. Jessica pulled up another timestamp. 9 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds, the footage showed Marcus's expression tightening, Andre's posture shifting. Timestamp when agitation became visible, his father said. What time did questioning begin? Jessica checked her notes. 9 hours 45 minutes and 12 seconds. So agitation appeared 2 minutes and 11 seconds after questioning started. He let that sink in. Ms. Tran, was the agitation the cause of your questioning, or the result? Silence. Kenneth tried to intervene. Dr. Richardson, agent discretion is built into our policies. Show me where discretion permits deviation from scanning procedures without documented justification. Miles flipped through something on his tablet. Manual Section 4.7 requires written documentation of concerns before denial authority is exercised. Was documentation completed before escalation? Marcus's father asked. Tom, who'd been standing near the wall, spoke up. Verbal report was made to me. Written documentation? No. So policy was violated. Kenneth leaned forward, his voice careful. Dr. Richardson, I understand your frustration, but I'm not frustrated, Kenneth. His father's tone was perfectly level. I'm documenting failures. He shared his screen. A prepared document appeared, dense with text and highlighted sections. I've mapped every procedural violation that occurred this morning. Shall I continue, or would you like to address the pattern? Kenneth's expression shifted. What pattern? Let's find out. Marcus's father pulled up another document. A spreadsheet. Columns of data. I took the liberty of requesting your gate denial statistics for the past 12 months. Denied boardings. Security escalations. Discretionary holds. He highlighted a section. Gate 42 specifically. Ms. Tran's shift performance. Jessica leaned forward, reading the screen. Demographic breakdown of denials, his father continued. Would you like me to read the percentages, or would you prefer to review them privately first? Kenneth's face had gone ashen. Miles spoke quietly. We should pause and consult with legal before proceeding further. Marcus's father nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. He paused, then added, but the flight doesn't move until we resolve this. And every minute it sits on the ground is another data point in the operational disruption analysis. Kenneth stood abruptly. We'll need 15 minutes. Take 30, Marcus's father said. I'm not going anywhere. The screen went dark but didn't disconnect. The message was clear. He was still there. Still watching. Still waiting. Kenneth, Jessica, and Miles left the room quickly. Tom followed. Carol sat frozen at the far end of the table. The operations woman gestured to her. Ms. Tran, please come with me. Carol stood on shaking legs and left. The door closed. Marcus and André were alone in the conference room. André spoke first, his voice low. Did Dad just?
Yeah,
Marcus said. He came with receipts. Marcus looked at the dark screen where his father's face had been moments before. The prepared documents. The statistics. The procedural manual. All of it ready before the meeting even started. His father hadn't just responded to the call. He'd anticipated every move. André leaned back in his chair. We're really doing this. Marcus nodded slowly. We're really doing this. Through the glass walls, he could see the terminal continuing its normal operations. Passengers boarding other flights. Gate agents scanning passes. Everything smooth and efficient. Everything except Gate 42. Where an entire aircraft sat on the ground, waiting. Where a regional vice president was now scrambling to contain a situation that had spiraled far beyond a simple boarding denial. Where Marcus's father had turned a moment of discrimination into a full institutional reckoning. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his father, stay calm. Let them sweat. Don't say anything unless I tell you to. Marcus showed it to André. His brother smiled for the first time since the TSA checkpoint. Dad really doesn't play, André said. No, Marcus agreed. He really doesn't. The 15 minutes stretched into 25. Marcus and André sat in the conference room, watching the terminal through the glass walls. Passengers moved past in steady streams. Rolling luggage. Coffee cups. The ordinary flow of travel completely disconnected from the locked room where they waited. André scrolled through his phone, not really looking at anything. Marcus sat still, hands folded on the table in front of him. The position felt deliberate. Controlled. Like if he moved, something inside him might break loose. At 10:08, the door opened. Kenneth returned, followed by Jessica and Miles. Their expressions were carefully neutral. Professional masks back in place. They sat. Kenneth folded his hands on the table, mirroring Marcus's posture. We've reviewed the situation, Kenneth said. And consulted with our legal and operations teams. Marcus waited. We take your concerns seriously, Kenneth continued. And we want to ensure this situation is handled appropriately. The language was perfect. Smooth. Non-committal. However, Kenneth said, and Marcus felt the shift coming before the words arrived. Our gate agent acted within the scope of her discretionary authority. While the process may have been uncomfortable, it did not constitute a policy violation. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. The tickets were verified, he said quietly. Yes. And you were cleared to board. After 20 minutes of questioning. Security verification takes time, Kenneth said. We appreciate your patience during that process. Miles spoke up. To be clear, you were never formally denied boarding. The verification process was simply more thorough than usual. Marcus looked at him. At the careful phrasing. The reframing of what had happened. 3 passengers boarded ahead of us without any questions, Marcus said. Our tickets were identical. Premium cabin, purchased in advance, valid confirmation codes. What made ours require additional verification? Kenneth didn't answer directly. Agent discretion allows for additional screening based on professional judgment. Based on what judgment criteria? Silence. Jessica cleared her throat. We're committed to reviewing our gate procedures to ensure consistency across all passenger interactions. It was a concession. Vague, non-binding, but still an acknowledgement that something had been wrong. Marcus felt André tense beside him. So that's it? André said. Process was fine, nothing to see here, have a nice flight. Kenneth's expression remained neutral. We're offering you both tickets on the next available flight to Atlanta. First class, no additional charge. As an apology for the inconvenience. Marcus understood immediately. Appeasement. Move them along. Close the file. What about accountability? Marcus asked. We take all feedback seriously and will incorporate it into our ongoing training programs. Training programs. The universal corporate non-answer. Miles leaned forward slightly. Mr. Richardson, I want to be clear. We value your business and your father's business relationship with Empire Air. This incident will be noted and reviewed at the appropriate levels. There it was. The acknowledgement of power. The subtle reminder that they knew who his father was, what leverage existed, what consequences might follow. But also the framing. This incident. Passive language. No one at fault. Just an unfortunate occurrence. Marcus looked at the screen where his father's face had been earlier. Now dark and silent. You're saying nothing will change, Marcus said. Kenneth hesitated. We're saying the process was followed. Whether that process needs adjustment is something we'll evaluate internally. Internally. Without oversight. With appropriate executive review. Marcus felt the trap close completely. They'd reviewed. They'd consulted. They determined that Carol had acted within policy. And now they were offering compensation to make it go away. His phone buzzed. Another text from his father. What are they offering? Marcus typed back, next flight. First class. Apology for inconvenience. No accountability. The response came immediately, don't accept. Walk out of the room. Now. Marcus stood. Kenneth looked up, surprised. Mr. Richardson. We're done here, Marcus said. He gestured to André, who grabbed his duffel and followed. They walked out of the conference room, back through the narrow hallway, through the airport personnel-only door, and into the main terminal. Gate 42 was visible ahead. The aircraft still sat at the jetway, though passengers had long since deplaned. The departure board showed delayed operational review. Marcus kept walking. Past the gate. Past the clusters of frustrated passengers waiting for updates. Past Tom standing at the podium, phone pressed to his ear. They found an empty gate 20 yards down the concourse and sat. André looked at Marcus. What just happened? They closed ranks, Marcus said. Reviewed themselves, found themselves blameless, offered us a voucher. That's it? That's it. André's voice rose slightly. So Carol gets away with it. Brad gets away with it. They all just keep their jobs and do the same thing to the next person. Marcus didn't respond. He was staring at his phone, at his father's last text. André leaned closer. Marcus. Make the call. I did call. He's been handling it. No. I mean the real call. The one where he doesn't just review procedures. The one where he actually uses the power. Marcus felt the weight of it. The thing he'd been avoiding since this morning. Since before this morning. Since the day he decided to build a career without his father's name attached to it. If I do that, Marcus said quietly, then I'm admitting I can't handle this on my own. You did handle it. You stayed calm. You followed their process. You asked the right questions. And they still protected her. Marcus looked at the departure board. At the flight that was supposed to take them to Atlanta. At the system that had decided he and his brother were suspicious simply for existing in premium seats. They did everything wrong, André continued. And you did everything right. And it didn't matter. So maybe doing it right isn't enough. Maybe you need to do it effectively. Marcus thought about his father's prepared documents. The statistics. The procedural manual. The way he'd walked into that conference room with answers already built. That wasn't reactive. That was strategic. His father hadn't been handling a crisis. He'd been building a case. And he'd been waiting for Marcus to decide whether to just get on the next flight, or actually change something. Marcus pulled out his phone. Found the contact, Dad's cell. His thumb hovered over the call button. He's going to know I couldn't do it alone, Marcus said. He already knows, André said. You called him an hour ago. This isn't about whether you can handle it. It's about what you want the outcome to be. Marcus thought about Carol. About Brad. About Kenneth's careful non-apology. About the next black passenger who'd stand at gate 42 and face the same discretionary authority with no recourse. He pressed call. The phone rang once. His father answered immediately. Marcus. Not a question. Just his name. Calm. Focused. Ready. Marcus took a breath. Dad, he said. I need you to make the second call. There was a pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. Tell me what they offered, his father said. Next flight. First class upgrade. Apology for the inconvenience. They reviewed the incident and determined the agent acted within discretionary authority. No policy violation. No accountability. Training program review. Marcus heard typing on the other end. Fast and precise. And you said? I walked out. Good. His father's voice carried quiet approval. Now listen carefully. Go back to gate 42. Stand where everyone can see you. Don't board anything. Don't accept anything. Don't move until I tell you to. What are you going to do? I'm going to show them the difference between handling an incident and fixing a system. Marcus heard the shift in his father's tone. Not anger. Something colder. More deliberate. This stops being about you and André in about 5 minutes, his father said. It becomes about every passenger they've done this to. Every discretionary decision that just happened to target the same demographic. Every policy that sounds neutral but gets applied selectively. How? Marcus asked. The first call got you in that conference room. The second call shuts down their operation until they agree to structural change. Marcus felt something shift. Not relief. Not vindication. Something heavier. Responsibility. Dad. You did the right thing, Marcus. You stayed calm. You documented everything. You gave them every chance to do the right thing on their own. They chose procedure over justice. Now we choose accountability over convenience. His father paused. Go back to the gate. And Marcus?
Yeah.
Don't sit down. Stand. Let them see you waiting. Let every passenger see Empire Air can't move that aircraft until this is resolved. The call ended. Marcus looked at André. He's shutting it down, Marcus said. Shutting what down? Everything. They stood and walked back toward gate 42. Tom was still at the podium. He looked up as they approached, his expression wary. Marcus stopped 10 feet from the desk. Visible. Unmissable. Exactly where his father had told him to stand. And he waited. Marcus stood 10 feet from the podium. André beside him. Not sitting. Not moving. Just waiting. Tom pretended to focus on his computer screen, but his glances toward them came every 15 seconds. Nervous. Uncertain. Other passengers watched too. Some with curiosity. Some with irritation. A few with something that looked like sympathy. Marcus checked his phone. 10:47 a.m. 3 minutes since his father ended the call. Then Carol's desk phone rang. She'd returned to the podium 5 minutes earlier, after being dismissed from the conference room. She'd avoided looking at Marcus entirely, busying herself with paperwork that didn't need her attention. The phone rang again. She picked it up. Gate 42, this is Carol. Her face changed immediately. The professional mask slipped. Her shoulders went rigid. Yes. Yes, sir. I understand, but I was following protocol. She stopped. Listened. Her hand tightened on the receiver. I had legitimate concerns about. Another pause. Longer this time. The color drained from her face. Yes. I understand. Right away. She set the phone down carefully, like it might break. Tom's radio crackled. He stepped away from the podium, pressing it to his ear. Marcus watched his expression shift from confusion to alarm. Tom walked back quickly, leaning close to Carol. His voice was low, but Marcus caught fragments. Regional says board them. Now. Carol's voice was barely audible. But. That's not a request. Brad appeared from wherever he'd gone after the conference room. He approached the podium, confusion visible on his face. What the hell is happening? Tom didn't answer. He just gestured toward Marcus and André, then made a sharp cutting motion with his hand. Stand down. Brad's posture shifted. The swagger gone. Just uncertainty now. Carol straightened. Smoothed her uniform. Walked toward Marcus with careful, measured steps. Her voice was professionally controlled, but something underneath had cracked. Mr. Richardson. We apologize for the delay. We're ready to board you now. Marcus didn't move. What changed? He asked quietly. Carol's eyes flicked away. We've completed our verification process. You completed that half an hour ago, Marcus said. What changed in the last 3 minutes? Carol couldn't meet his eyes. We're ready to board you now, sir. André stepped forward. That's it? We just walk on like nothing happened? Marcus held up a hand, stopping him. He looked at Carol. Really looked at her. Saw the fear there now. The realization that she'd miscalculated badly. He picked up their boarding passes from where they still sat on the podium. Scanned them himself at the reader. 2 beeps. Green lights. No, Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to her. This isn't over. They walked down the jetway. The flight attendant greeted them with the same professional warmth as before, still unaware of everything that had transpired. Welcome back aboard, gentlemen. Marcus nodded and moved into the cabin. Most of the first-class passengers had stayed on the plane during the delay. They looked up as Marcus and André returned. Some faces held questions. Others showed carefully maintained neutrality. Marcus and André reclaimed their seats. 2A and 2B. Marcus buckled his seatbelt. André did the same. So we won? André asked quietly. Marcus looked out the window at the terminal. At Tom standing alone now at the podium. At Carol nowhere visible. Dad made the first call, Marcus said. He's about to make the second. The cabin settled. A few passengers shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. The ordinary sounds of waiting. Then the captain's voice came over the intercom. Folks, we're experiencing a brief operational delay. We'll have an update for you shortly. Appreciate your patience. Passengers groaned. The businessman in the charcoal suit muttered something under his breath. 5 minutes passed. A flight attendant appeared beside Marcus's row. Young. Professional. Her smile was strained. Mr. Richardson? The captain would like a word, if you could come forward please. Marcus unbuckled and followed her to the cockpit. The captain stood in the doorway. Late 50s. Gray at the temples. His expression was serious but not hostile. Sir, he said quietly. I've been informed of the gate incident. We're holding departure pending internal review. Marcus kept his voice level. We're on board. The issue's resolved. The captain shook his head slightly. With respect, sir. No, it isn't. He glanced back into the cockpit, then returned his attention to Marcus. We've received orders from regional operations. Gate return ordered for personnel interview. The aircraft doesn't move until that review is complete. Marcus processed that. How long? Unknown. But I wanted you to know directly. The captain paused. I'm sorry this happened on my aircraft. Marcus studied his face. Saw genuine concern there. Not just liability management. Actual regret. Thank you for telling me, Marcus said. He returned to his seat. André looked at him. Well? Plane's not moving until this is handled properly. André leaned back, a slow smile forming. Dad doesn't play. Through the window, Marcus watched the gate area. Carol was being escorted away by someone in a dark suit. Not security. Corporate. Her badge was no longer visible on her uniform. Tom stood at the podium, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand rubbing his face. Brad had disappeared entirely. The PA crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently in an operational review. We appreciate your continued patience and will update you as soon as we have more information. The businessman in first class turned to his seatmate. This is ridiculous. Through the cockpit door, Marcus could hear the captain on the radio. Fragments carried back. Confirmed. Gate hold. Personnel review in progress. The departure board visible through the window updated. Flight 1847 to Atlanta. Delayed, operational review. Passengers in the terminal began gathering near the gate, checking the board, asking questions. Tom gestured helplessly, clearly receiving no answers himself. A family with small children sat down heavily in the gate area chairs. The mother pulled out her phone, already calling someone. Probably to change connecting flight arrangements. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his father: Kenneth is reconvening the meeting in 10 minutes. Remote participation required. They're bringing Carol back in. This is when we build the case. Marcus showed the text to André. We going back? André asked.
Yeah.
What's he going to do? Marcus thought about his father's prepared documents. The statistics. The demographic breakdown of gate denials. The procedural manual marked with violations. He's going to make them choose, Marcus said. Between protecting one agent and protecting their operational license. Can he do that? Marcus looked at the aircraft around them. At the jetway. At the terminal systems that connected to federal aviation regulations, civil rights compliance, corporate liability exposure. He consults for them, Marcus said. He knows exactly where the pressure points are. Another text: don't accept any settlements. Don't agree to anything. Just observe and let me handle it. 5 minutes later, a different flight attendant approached. Older. More senior. Mr. Richardson? We need you and your brother to deplane again. There's a meeting. They unbuckled. Walked back down the aisle past the same passengers who'd watched them board twice now. The businessman didn't hide his frustration. Are you serious? Marcus ignored him. They exited into the terminal. The gate area had filled with displaced passengers. Families. Business travelers. Students. All waiting for a flight that wouldn't move. Tom gestured toward the airport personnel-only door. They followed him back through the narrow hallway. Back to the conference room. Kenneth was already seated. Jessica beside him. Miles across the table. 2 additional people Marcus didn't recognize. Legal, probably. Or operations management. And Carol. Seated at the far end again. Her badge on the table in front of her. The screen activated. Marcus's father appeared. Same mahogany office. Same composed expression. But this time, he had additional windows open on his screen. Documents. Spreadsheets. Charts. Thank you for reconvening, his father said. His tone was perfectly professional. Before we discuss next steps, I'd like to walk through some data. He shared his screen. A spreadsheet appeared. Rows and rows of information. Gate 42. Denials and escalations. Past 18 months. He highlighted a column. Demographic breakdown. Kenneth's face went pale. Jessica leaned forward, reading the numbers. Miles closed his eyes briefly. Marcus's father continued calmly. Now let's discuss what accountability looks like. The conference room filled quickly. Kenneth sat at the head of the table, flanked by Jessica and Miles. 2 additional executives entered, introducing themselves briefly. Senior VP of Operations. Director of Compliance. Their presence meant this had escalated beyond local management. Carol sat isolated at the far end, her badge still on the table in front of her. Tom and Brad stood near the wall, not quite seated, not quite dismissed. Their status unclear. Marcus and André took chairs along the side. Observer positions. Witnesses. Miles placed a digital recorder in the center of the table. The red light blinked on. This meeting is being documented for compliance purposes, he said. All participants are aware of the recording. No one objected. Kenneth folded his hands on the table. His professional composure was back, but tension showed in the tightness around his eyes. We're conducting a formal review of the boarding incident at Gate 42, he said. This review was requested by executive leadership in response to concerns raised about procedural compliance and passenger treatment. He looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Richardson, we appreciate your cooperation in this process. Marcus nodded but said nothing. His father's text was clear. Observe. Don't agree to anything. Jessica opened her tablet. Before we proceed, we have a remote participant joining this review. She tapped the screen. The wall monitor activated. Connection sounds. Camera adjusting. The screen filled with Marcus's father. He sat in his office, perfectly framed. Mahogany bookshelves behind him. Awards and certifications visible but not ostentatious. Blue suit, white shirt, navy tie. Every detail deliberate. His expression was calm. Composed. Utterly controlled. Kenneth's posture straightened immediately. Carol's eyes widened. Recognition. Tom's face went slack. Jessica's pen stopped moving. The room held its breath. Good afternoon, Marcus's father said. His voice carried the same measured authority it always did. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Williams Richardson, CEO of Richardson Consulting Group. He paused, letting that land. Empire Air is one of our corporate clients. We've worked together on operational efficiency, customer service protocols, and compliance frameworks for the past 6 years. Kenneth's jaw tightened slightly. The relationship wasn't just professional. It was contractual. Financial. More importantly, his father continued, Marcus and André are my sons. Silence. Carol's hand went to her mouth. Tom closed his eyes. The director of compliance leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully neutral but his meaning clear. This just became much more serious. Marcus's father opened a folder on his desk. The sound was crisp through the speakers. Now. Before we discuss perceptions, optics, or intent, let's discuss procedure. He shared his screen. A document appeared. The Empire Air Gate Operations Manual, version 12.4. I have your current operations manual, he said. I've also pulled surveillance footage, radio logs, and reservation system records for the incident in question. Miles glanced at Kenneth. He already has everything. Shall we walk through what happened? Marcus's father asked. Step by step. Kenneth cleared his throat. Dr. Richardson, we're conducting a thorough internal review. Then let's be thorough. The interruption was smooth. Almost gentle. But absolute. Marcus's father turned his attention to Carol. Ms. Tran, would you walk us through your decision-making process? Carol sat frozen. Every eye in the room turned to her. Take your time, Marcus's father said. This is being recorded. Carol's voice was small. I had concerns about the ticket authenticity. What specific indicators prompted those concerns? The booking was recent. Premium seating. I wanted to verify. How recent was the booking? 4 days prior to departure. Marcus's father nodded. And your policy on advance bookings? Miles spoke up. Our system permits bookings and upgrades up to the moment of departure. 4 days is well within standard parameters. So the timing alone wasn't unusual. No, Miles confirmed. Marcus's father returned to Carol. What else prompted your concern? I had a feeling something wasn't right. A feeling. He repeated the word without inflection. Just observation. Yes. Based on what observable factors? Carol hesitated. The passengers seemed I just thought additional verification was appropriate. Marcus's father pulled up another document. Security footage. Time-stamped. This footage shows you requesting identification before scanning the boarding passes. Is that correct? Carol nodded. Standard procedure is to scan first. If the system flags an issue, then request additional verification. Why did you reverse that order? I wanted to confirm identity. But you didn't know there was an issue with identity until after verification. Which you hadn't performed yet. Silence. Jessica pulled up the footage on her tablet, reviewing it with new attention to the sequence. Marcus's father continued. You called reservations. What did they confirm? That the tickets were valid. And after receiving that confirmation, did you board the passengers? No. Why not? Carol's voice cracked slightly. I still had security concerns. What were those concerns, specifically? The passengers seemed agitated. Jessica checked the footage timestamp. Visible agitation appears at 9 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds. When did questioning begin? She scrolled back. Initial contact at 9 hours 45 minutes and 12 seconds. Marcus's father's tone remained level. So the agitation you cited as a security concern appeared 2 minutes after your questioning began. It was a response to your actions, not a cause for them. Carol had no answer. Tom attempted to intervene. Agent discretion is standard protocol. Show me where discretion permits deviation from scanning procedures without documented justification. Miles flipped through his tablet. Manual Section 4.7 requires written documentation of concerns before denial authority is exercised. Was documentation completed? Marcus's father asked. Tom's voice was quiet. Verbal report was made to me. Written documentation? No. So procedure was violated. Kenneth leaned forward. Dr. Richardson, I understand your frustration, but agent discretion is built into our operational framework. I'm not frustrated, Kenneth. The correction was gentle but firm. I'm documenting procedural failures. Marcus's father shared another document. A prepared analysis. Highlighted sections. Citations. I've mapped every deviation from protocol that occurred this morning. Each one individually defensible, perhaps. But the pattern tells a different story. He pulled up a spreadsheet. I've also requested your boarding denial data for the past 18 months. Gate 42 specifically. Kenneth's face went ashen. Demographic breakdown of passengers subjected to additional screening, escalation to supervisors, and boarding denials. He highlighted a column of percentages. The numbers were stark. Jessica leaned forward, reading them. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to visible concern. The director of compliance made a note on his tablet, his movements deliberate. Miles closed his eyes briefly. The legal exposure was becoming clear. Marcus's father continued calmly. Let me be direct. I'm not calling anyone in this room racist. Intent is difficult to prove and ultimately beside the point. He looked at Carol through the screen. What I'm documenting is discriminatory impact. Actions that, regardless of intent, resulted in differential treatment based on observable characteristics. Carol's hands trembled on the table. The question isn't whether Ms. Tran intended harm, Marcus's father said. The question is whether Empire Air's discretionary authority framework permits bias to operate unchecked. He turned his attention to Kenneth. And whether your institution prioritizes protecting that framework over protecting passengers. Kenneth's voice was careful. We take all passenger concerns seriously. Then take this one seriously. Marcus's father's tone sharpened slightly. Just enough. Because if we can't resolve this through voluntary compliance reform, we move to formal complaints. Department of Transportation. FAA. Civil Rights Division. And discovery in those proceedings will pull far more data than just Gate 42. The room went very quiet. Miles spoke for the first time since the father's reveal. What are you proposing? Marcus's father pulled up another prepared document. Accountability. Structural correction. Measurable outcomes. He shared his screen. A presentation deck appeared. Title slide, Operational Compliance Framework. Kenneth stared at it. You prepared this in advance. I prepared this, Marcus's father said, while listening to my son describe being treated like a criminal for presenting valid documents. His voice remained level. But the words landed like hammer blows. Now, let's discuss what real accountability looks like. The presentation deck remained on screen. 5 slides. Clean. Professional. Devastating. Kenneth stared at it, his expression carefully controlled but his posture rigid. Marcus's father didn't rush. He let the silence build, let the weight of the prepared document settle over the room. These are the proposed changes, his father said. Third-party compliance audit. Mandatory supervisor co-signature for escalations. Digital documentation with time-stamped justifications. Executive accountability tied to complaint ratios. Anonymous passenger reporting that bypasses local management. He advanced to the next slide. This isn't diversity training. This is operational correction with measurable outcomes. Miles was already taking notes. Jessica had pulled the deck up on her tablet, reading through each point with focused attention. The Director of Compliance spoke for the first time. Implementation timeline? 60 days full rollout, Marcus's father said. 30 for audit contract execution. Kenneth found his voice. We'd need to review resource allocation, budgetary impact. Less than litigation, Marcus's father said simply. And I'm offering a choice. Implement these changes voluntarily as part of continuous improvement, or I file formal complaints with DOT, FAA, and the Civil Rights Division. Your operational certifications get audited either way. One path lets you control the narrative. The room went still. Kenneth looked at Miles, who gave a small, deliberate nod. We'll agree to the framework, Kenneth said carefully. Pending legal review of specific implementation details. 60 days, Marcus's father repeated. Non-negotiable on timeline. Kenneth nodded slowly. Marcus's father advanced to the final slide. It was a single question. What happens to the personnel involved? He looked directly at Kenneth through the screen. That's your decision. But it needs to be documented, defensible, and consistent with policy. Jessica spoke up, her voice professional but firm. Based on the procedural violations documented in this review, we have grounds for disciplinary action up to and including termination. Carol's face had gone completely pale. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Kenneth turned to her. Ms. Tran, you're being placed on administrative leave effective immediately pending completion of the formal review. Carol's voice was barely audible. I have a family. Which is why this is administrative leave, not termination, Kenneth said. The review will determine final employment status. He turned to Tom. Mr. Harrison, you're being reassigned pending supervisory review of your response to the escalation. Tom nodded stiffly. Kenneth looked at Brad. TSA personnel decisions are outside our authority, but we'll be forwarding documentation of your involvement to your chain of command. Brad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Miles addressed the room. This incident will be documented as a formal discrimination complaint. Federal compliance reporting will be filed as required. An independent third party will conduct the demographic audit Dr. Richardson outlined. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Richardson, you have the right to file a personal complaint in addition to the institutional review. That's separate from the systemic changes being discussed. Do you wish to proceed with a formal individual complaint? Marcus felt the weight of the question. Filing meant interviews. Documentation. Potential depositions. His name attached to federal records. The incident following him in databases and background checks. Not filing meant the institutional changes happened, but the personal accountability remained internal. Corporate. Controlled. He thought about the young black college student he'd seen board smoothly 3 months from now in his father's vision. The QR code at the gate. The supervisor standing watch during boarding. He thought about the next person who wouldn't have a CEO father to call. Yes, Marcus said. I want to file. André exhaled beside him. Relief and validation mixed together. Kenneth made a note. We'll provide you with the necessary documentation and connect you with our passenger advocacy office. Marcus's father's voice came through the speakers, quieter now. Marcus, anything else you want to say? Marcus looked at the people around the table. At Carol, whose career was likely over. At Tom, who'd chosen institutional loyalty over doing the right thing. At Kenneth, who'd been forced to act only when the power dynamic shifted. If we hadn't called you, Marcus said, looking at Kenneth, what would have happened? Kenneth hesitated. We would have investigated after receiving your complaint. After we missed our flight. After we were escorted out. After it didn't matter anymore. Kenneth had no response. André leaned forward slightly. So the only reason we're sitting here, the only reason anyone is taking this seriously, is our last name. Marcus's father spoke before anyone else could. Which is exactly why the system needs to change. So the next person doesn't need a CEO father to be treated fairly. He looked at Kenneth. That's what these reforms are for. To protect passengers who don't have leverage. To make the process work regardless of who's watching. Kenneth nodded slowly. You have my commitment. And I'll be verifying that commitment, Marcus's father said. Quarterly reviews. Audit participation. Measurable outcomes. This doesn't end when Marcus and André board their flight. Miles closed his tablet. We'll have implementation documentation to you within 72 hours. Marcus's father nodded. I'll review and respond. The screen went dark. Not disconnected. Just muted. He was still there. Still watching. Kenneth stood. Ms. Tran, please surrender your badge and company equipment to Jessica. Someone from HR will contact you regarding next steps. Carol stood on trembling legs. She unclipped her badge with shaking hands and placed it on the table. Jessica collected it without comment. An operations escort appeared at the door. Carol was led out quietly. No drama. No scene. Just procedure. The room began to empty. Tom left with his supervisor. Brad was escorted out by someone Marcus assumed was TSA management. The senior executives filed out, already on their phones, already managing the next phase. Kenneth approached Marcus and André. I apologize, he said. For what happened? For the process failures. For the fact that it took your father's intervention to get our attention. Marcus met his eyes. I don't want an apology. I want to know this won't happen to someone else. It won't, Kenneth said. You have my word. Words are easy, André said quietly. We'll see if the changes stick. Kenneth nodded and left. Marcus and André sat alone in the conference room. Through the glass walls, they could see the terminal returning to its normal rhythm. Flights boarding. Passengers moving. The everyday flow of travel completely disconnected from the institutional reckoning that had just occurred. Marcus's phone buzzed. His father, via text, proud of you. Both of you. Now go catch your flight. Marcus showed it to André. Think it'll actually change anything? André asked. I don't know, Marcus said. But we made it harder for them to ignore next time. They stood and walked back into the terminal. Gate 42 had a different agent now. Young. Professional. She smiled as they approached. Mr. Richardson? Your flight is ready for boarding. We apologize again for the delay. She scanned their passes smoothly. No questions. No hesitation. Enjoy your flight. They boarded for the third time. The cabin had a different energy now. Passengers had been waiting for over 2 hours. Frustration was visible. But no one said anything to Marcus or André. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for departure. We apologize for the extended delay due to operational review. Flight time to Atlanta will be 1 hour and 45 minutes. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. The jetway disconnected. The aircraft pushed back from the gate. Marcus looked out the window as they began to taxi. He could see gate 42 receding in the distance. The new agent at the podium. The QR code placard that would be installed next week. The supervisor position that would be permanently staffed during peak boarding times. Small changes. Procedural changes. But changes nonetheless. André leaned over. You okay? Marcus thought about the question. About the morning that had started with him reviewing a presentation deck and ended with him filing a federal discrimination complaint. About the pride he'd felt in handling things independently and the humility of needing his father's power to force accountability. About Carol, whose bias had been unconscious but no less damaging. About Kenneth, who'd protected the system until the cost became too high. About every passenger who'd watched and done nothing because it wasn't their problem. I don't know yet, Marcus said honestly. The aircraft turned onto the runway. Engines spooled up. They accelerated down the tarmac and lifted into the air. Marcus watched the airport shrink below them. The terminals. The gates. The systems that would be audited and reformed and measured. The flight leveled off. Atlanta was 90 minutes away. But the real work was just beginning. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was at his desk, finishing revisions on a client proposal, when the notification appeared. Subject line, Empire Air, Incident Resolution and Compliance Update. He clicked it open. The message was formal. Professional. Signed by Kenneth Strauss and the Director of Compliance. Dear Mr. Richardson. We are writing to inform you that the internal investigation into the boarding incident at Gate 42 on March 15 has been completed. The investigation confirmed multiple procedural violations and inconsistent application of boarding verification protocols. Findings. Ms. Carol Tran's employment has been terminated effective immediately for failure to follow established boarding procedures, improper use of discretionary authority, and lack of required documentation prior to escalation. This decision was made in accordance with company policy and employment guidelines. Supervisor Thomas Harrison has been reassigned to non-passenger-facing operations and will undergo mandatory retraining on escalation protocols and bias recognition. TSA Officer Bradley Kenton has been formally counseled by TSA management and removed from gate liaison duties pending completion of refresher training. Additionally, the following systemic changes have been implemented across all Empire Air operations. Third-party compliance audit completed, with quarterly follow-up reviews scheduled. Mandatory supervisor co-signature now required for all boarding escalations. Digital documentation system deployed requiring time-stamped justifications before denial authority can be exercised. Anonymous passenger feedback QR codes installed at all gates, routing directly to corporate compliance. Executive performance metrics now include complaint ratio tracking. Bias recognition and de-escalation training mandatory for all customer-facing staff. We deeply regret the experience you and your brother had while traveling with us. This incident revealed gaps in our operational oversight that we are committed to addressing systemically. Please find attached a formal letter of apology and documentation of the corrective measures undertaken. Respectfully. Kenneth Strauss, Regional Vice President. Empire Air Corporate Compliance. Marcus read it twice. Then he opened the attachment. The apology was carefully worded. Acknowledged harm without admitting legal liability. Expressed commitment to change without promising perfection. Corporate language. Measured. Strategic. But real nonetheless. He forwarded the email to André, then to his father. His phone rang 3 minutes later. "You see it?" his father asked.
Yeah.
"How do you feel?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, looking out his office window at the city below. "I don't know. It's not satisfying, exactly. Carol lost her job. Tom got demoted. Brad got reassigned. But it still feels like it took too much to get here." "It did take too much," his father said. "That's the point. The system shouldn't require a CEO's intervention to work correctly. That's why the structural changes matter more than the individual consequences." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You think it'll stick?" he asked. "The audit requirement creates external accountability. The anonymous reporting removes local suppression. The executive metrics create financial incentive. It's not perfect, but it's enforceable." His father paused. "You did the right thing filing the complaint. Not just for you. For everyone who comes after." Marcus thought about the young black college student from his father's example. The one who'd board smoothly now. Who'd never know that Marcus and André had been questioned, delayed, humiliated for the crime of presenting valid tickets while black. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if we didn't have your name," Marcus said. "If we were just two random passengers. Then Carol would still be at that gate," his father said quietly. "And the pattern would have continued. That's what bothers me. The injustice of it. That power was the only thing that worked." "Power is a tool," his father said. "The question is what you build with it. You could have taken the voucher and walked away. You chose accountability instead. That's character, not privilege." Marcus heard the weight in his father's voice. Not pride, exactly. Something deeper. Respect. "I wanted to prove I could handle it myself," Marcus said. "You did handle it. You stayed calm under pressure. You documented everything. You made strategic decisions. Calling for help when you need it isn't weakness. It's wisdom." Marcus smiled slightly. "You've been waiting to say that, haven't you? Since you were 16 and refused to ask for directions." They were quiet for a moment. Not awkward. Just present. "Dad?"
Yeah.
"Thank you. For not just fixing it. For making them fix it." His father's voice softened. "That's the difference between power and responsibility. Anyone with resources can solve their own problem. Real change means solving it for people who don't have those resources." They talked for a few more minutes. About work. About André's summer plans. About their grandmother, who'd heard the whole story and declared that both her grandsons had handled themselves with dignity and fire. After the call ended, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the email. He thought about Carol. About whether she'd learned anything or just felt victimized by consequences. About Tom, demoted and resentful, or genuinely reconsidering his assumptions. About Brad, going through the motions of training or actually examining his biases. He didn't know. Couldn't know. But the systems were different now. Measurable. Accountable. Harder to abuse. 6 weeks later, Marcus had another business trip. Same airport. Same airline. Different gate. He and André walked through security without incident. No extra screening. No lingering stares. They reached gate 42. A new agent stood at the podium. Older woman. Black. Professional. She greeted passengers with genuine warmth. A supervisor stood nearby, visible but not intrusive. Standard practice now. On the wall beside the desk, a small placard with a QR code. Concerns about your boarding experience? Report directly to corporate compliance. Marcus watched a young black man in a Howard hoodie approach the desk. College age. Traveling alone. The agent scanned his pass immediately. Smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Johnson. Enjoy your flight. No questions. No pause. No suspicion. Just procedure." The young man boarded without ever knowing that 3 months ago, this exact gate had been the site of a 2-hour standoff that grounded a flight and triggered a corporate reckoning. He'd never know that Marcus and André had stood here. That they'd been questioned and delayed and forced to prove their right to exist in premium seating. He'd never know that their father had used power not for revenge, but for correction. And that was exactly the point. Marcus and André boarded their own flight smoothly. Settled into their seats. The aircraft pushed back on time. As they lifted into the air, Marcus looked out the window at the airport below. At the systems that had been broken and were now, slowly, being rebuilt. At the terminals where thousands of passengers would travel today, most of them unaware of the quiet reforms happening in the background. Justice wasn't viral. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't satisfying in the way revenge would be. It was procedural. Measurable. Incremental. It was QR codes and audit requirements and executive accountability metrics. It was one young man boarding a flight without fear. And it was enough. Marcus closed his eyes as the plane climbed higher. He'd proven he could handle pressure with dignity. He'd learned that asking for help was strategy, not surrender. He'd used privilege not to escape consequences, but to create accountability. His father had taught him that power without responsibility was just dominance. But responsibility without power was just martyrdom. Real change required both. And real change, Marcus understood now, wasn't a moment. It was momentum. The plane leveled off. Atlanta was 90 minutes away. But the work they'd started would continue long after landing. One reform at a time. One passenger at a time. One generation teaching the next that justice isn't about winning. It's about building systems where winning isn't necessary. Where everyone gets treated fairly. Not because someone powerful is watching. But because the system finally works the way it should have all along. 6 months after the incident, Dr. Williams Richardson sat in his office reviewing a quarterly compliance report. The document was dense with data. Charts tracking boarding denials. Graphs showing escalation patterns. Demographic breakdowns that had previously revealed stark disparities. He scrolled to the executive summary. Complaint metrics, down 34% across all Empire Air operations. Escalations requiring supervisor intervention, down 41%. Gate 42 specifically, 0 formal complaints filed in past 90 days. Anonymous feedback submissions, up 127%, indicating increased passenger trust in reporting mechanisms. Third-party audit findings, substantial improvement in procedural consistency. Continued monitoring recommended. Williams leaned back in his chair, reading the notes section. 12 denials had been flagged during the audit period. 8 showed legitimate documentation. 4 were escalated to corporate review. 2 resulted in additional agent training. None showed the demographic clustering that had been so obvious in the previous analysis. It wasn't perfect. But it was measurable progress. He forwarded the report to Marcus with a 2-line message, progress. Keep watching. Then he returned to his other work. The reforms at Empire Air were one contract among dozens. But they mattered. Not because they were high-profile. Because they proved that systems could change when accountability had teeth. 3 time zones away, Marcus stood at the front of a glass-walled conference room presenting to a room full of executives. The client was a mid-sized tech company struggling with customer retention. Marcus's deck outlined a strategic restructuring of their support operations. He clicked to the next slide. A process flow diagram showing how isolated friction points compounded into systemic failures. The issue isn't individual performance, Marcus said, his voice calm and authoritative. It's that your escalation pathways create bottlenecks that penalize both customers and frontline staff. You're measuring the wrong metrics and incentivizing the wrong behaviors. The VP of Operations frowned. We've tried training initiatives. Improvement hasn't stuck. Marcus nodded. Because training addresses symptoms. You need to address the structure. Change the workflow. Change the accountability mechanisms. Make the right action the easy action. A woman across the table leaned forward. We've gotten pushback every time we've tried to change established processes. How do you handle resistance to change? Marcus paused. The question landed differently than it would have 6 months ago. You address the system, not just the symptom, he said. People resist change when they think it's arbitrary or punitive. But if you can show them that the current system is failing measurably, and the new system creates better outcomes for everyone, resistance becomes harder to justify. He advanced to the next slide. Projected outcomes. Measurable benchmarks. Quarterly review points. You build accountability into the framework. You make progress visible. And you don't stop watching just because the first report looks good. The VP nodded slowly. That's a longer timeline than we hoped. Real change always is, Marcus said. After the presentation, his colleague approached him in the hallway. Younger guy, 2 years out of business school, still figuring out how to command a room. That was solid, he said. Where'd you learn to handle objections like that? Marcus smiled slightly. Personal experience. 2 weeks later, Marcus was back at the airport. Solo trip this time. Another client meeting. Another city. The routine was familiar now. Not a test. Just work. He woke in his apartment at 6:15. Showered. Dressed in the same deliberate way he always had. Brooks Brothers shirt, dark chinos, Chelsea boots. But the internal monologue had shifted. He wasn't dressing to prove he belonged. He was dressing because this was who he was. The rideshare arrived on time. The driver made minimal small talk. Traffic was light. Marcus walked through the terminal with his carry-on and messenger bag, scanning the departure board. His flight was on time. Gate 42. He felt a flicker of something. Not anxiety. Recognition. Security was smooth. TSA pre-check line moved quickly. No one pulled him aside. No extra screening. Just procedure. He walked through the terminal, past the coffee shops and newsstands, past other travelers who looked tired or excited or bored. No one gave him a second glance. Gate 42 came into view. Different agent at the podium. Younger. Black woman, professional, efficient. A supervisor stood nearby, reviewing something on a tablet but clearly present. The QR code placard was still mounted beside the desk. Marcus found a seat and pulled out his laptop. Opened his email. Replied to a few messages. The mundane work of business travel. At 8:40, the boarding announcement came. Now boarding first class and passengers needing additional assistance for Flight 1847 to Atlanta. Marcus stood and approached the podium. The agent looked up and smiled. Professional warmth. Not performative. Just present. Good morning, she said. Marcus handed her his boarding pass and ID. She scanned the pass. The system beeped. Green light. She glanced at the ID, confirmed the match, handed it back. You're all set, Mr. Richardson. Seat 2A. Enjoy your flight. No pause. No extra questions. No call to a supervisor. Just procedure. Thank you, Marcus said. He walked down the jetway, boarded the aircraft, found his seat. As he settled in and buckled his seatbelt, he pulled out his phone. Texted André, at gate. No drama. The response came immediately, progress. Marcus smiled. The cabin filled. Other passengers boarded. Business travelers. Families. A college student in a Howard hoodie who reminded Marcus of André. The flight attendant made her welcome announcement. The captain came on to confirm flight time and weather. Everything normal. Everything as it should be. The aircraft pushed back on time. Marcus looked out the window as they began to taxi. He could see the terminal from here. Gate 42 receding into the distance. The agent helping another passenger. The supervisor still present. The systems functioning the way they were supposed to. He thought about Carol, wherever she was now. Whether she'd learned anything or just blamed him for the consequences of her own choices. He thought about the reforms. The audits. The quarterly reports his father forwarded with brief, approving notes. He thought about the countless passengers who'd walk through that gate in the coming months and years. Most of them would never know what had happened here. Never know that the smooth, professional process they experienced was the result of someone else's fight. And that was the point. Justice wasn't supposed to be visible. It was supposed to be normal. The plane turned onto the runway. Engines spooled up. Marcus's phone buzzed one more time. His father, saw you're traveling today. Safe flight. Marcus typed back, thanks, Dad. Then added, the system's holding. His father's response was immediate, because you made sure it would. The aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into the air. Marcus watched the airport fall away beneath them. The terminals. The gates. The infrastructure that moved millions of people every day, most of them unaware of the quiet battles fought to make those systems fair. He thought about the conversation with his client. About addressing systems, not symptoms. About building accountability into frameworks so that doing the right thing became the default, not the exception. He thought about his own journey. From the morning he'd stood at this same gate, humiliated and angry, to now, when he could board without the weight of proving he belonged. The work wasn't finished. It never would be. Systems needed constant watching. Accountability required vigilance. Progress could slip backward if no one kept measuring. But the momentum was real. The data showed it. The smooth boarding process confirmed it. The absence of complaint reports validated it. One passenger at a time. One reform at a time. One generation teaching the next that power wasn't just about protecting yourself. It was about building structures that protected everyone. Marcus closed his eyes as the plane climbed higher. He'd learned that independence didn't mean refusing help. It meant knowing when to use the resources available and what to build with them. He'd learned that his father's power wasn't something to run from or rely on blindly. It was a tool. A responsibility. A legacy he could choose to honor by using it the right way. He'd learned that real change wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. Measurable. Incremental. It was a gate agent scanning a boarding pass without hesitation. It was a compliance report showing sustained improvement. It was a system that worked because someone had forced it to. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Through the window, Marcus could still see the city below. The airport was a small cluster of buildings now, barely distinguishable from the urban sprawl around it. But he knew what was happening down there. Knew the reforms were holding. Knew the next passenger who approached Gate 42 would be treated fairly not because someone powerful was watching, but because the system finally worked the way it should have all along. That wasn't victory. Victory implied an ending. This was momentum. And momentum, Marcus understood now, was what became change. Not in a day. Not in a moment. But in the quiet, consistent application of fair rules. In the accountability that outlasted individual actors. In the systems that protected people who couldn't protect themselves. His father had taught him that. The airport had tested it. And now Marcus carried it forward. Not as a burden. As a compass. The flight attendant offered drinks. Marcus accepted water. Opened his laptop. Reviewed notes for tomorrow's meeting. Work continued. Life continued. Travel continued. But the terminal below was different now. Same gates. Same aircraft. Same passengers. Different system. And that difference, small and procedural and unmeasured by most, was everything. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If Marcus and Andre's fight for dignity moved you, if the moment he made that call hit different, then you already know what kind of stories we tell here. Click the video on your screen right now. Same weight. Same truth. Same reminder that real change isn't a moment, it's momentum.